derived a kind of important relationship. In fact, just to kind of recant that, we had a whole table of numbers, and what I'd like to do is graph that marginal cost curve that we had. So if we put out quantity in dollars here, we drew the generic ones last time. But using the numbers that we had in the table, I want to graph that out. And in the table, the quantities ranged from what to what? What did the quantities range from in the table? Up to 460. Good. So what I'd like you to do is just go kind of 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and do some nice spacing for yourself. And the reason is we're going to see the shape of the marginal cost curve kind of reveal itself, because the quantities are in differing amounts as well. So over here we'll have dollars, and we got a range up to $1.27. So let's just go 50 cents, $1, $1.50, $2. So 50 cents, $1, $1.50, and $2. And so now we're just going to plot the points. So you can go ahead and start plotting points for our marginal cost curve. So the first unit gave us cost of how much in the first range? $1. Now, what would be an appropriate spot to put that cost curve, do you think? Do we put it on the 100? Kind of in between. And so I wanted to call that to your attention, that you might see that in some of your homework problems where the quantities, we're kind of jumping a lot of hamburgers, right? And so what's the cost of the first hamburger? Well, we're saying it's about $1. The second is $1, the third is $1, the fourth is $1. And so really we've got the first one, if we were to kind of perfectly do what we're doing, is kind of like this at 100, all of the first ones. But we know that that's not what's really going on with the data. And so one convention that we have is to say, over this range, which might sound kind of familiar, remember when we did the production possibilities frontier? Over this range, the cost of those hamburgers is $1. You kind of put it right in the middle of that range. And then what's the cost of the next section? What does production ramp up to? When we add a second worker, hamburgers jump to what according to your schedule? 220. 220. So the extra workers, so you can kind of eyeball where you think a 220 is. Now we got this range, and the price is 84 cents. So again, just kind of eyeball an 84. And that's the range. If we kind of split it, we could kind of think of it dropping down over this range. And then we just kind of take the midpoint to put another big dot here at 84 cents. Over the next range, when I hire the third person, production ramps up to what? 320. So we go out to here, but we find that our costs actually go up because diminishing marginal product kicks in. And they go back up to about $1 from this range to this range. We'll put a big fat dot in the middle there. Raise your hand if you're not kind of tracking what I'm doing here. What's that? Yeah, it's doing the dip thing, right. And raise your hand if you don't understand what I'm doing with these, the placement of the dots. So we're just kind of averaging over that using the information that we've got. All right, then we add the fourth person, and production ramps up to 400. And that brings our cost up to $1.25 is what we calculated. So $1.25 over here. So we kind of have this space between 320 and there. We'll put a big fat dot here. Over that production range from 320 to 400, the cost of those additional burgers are $1.25. And then finally we ramp up to 460 units. And that causes our cost to go all the way up to $1.67. So we start really ramping up here. Somewhere over here is $1.67. And we've got it over this range here from 400. Put a big fat dot. And then if you just connect the dots, you end up getting that J-shaped marginal cost curve. And the thing I wanted to do, why I was being a little more careful with the graphing of it, is to convince you that that can be really escalating fast. As the law of diminishing marginal product kicks in, we can have costs going up pretty fast. All right. Questions there? So I think I mentioned it, but maybe didn't write it. I didn't put the law of increasing costs, did I? The law of increasing cost. And we're going to talk about it a little differently than how I did the law of diminishing marginal product. We get the law of increasing cost because of the law of diminishing marginal product. So costs at the margin, marginal cost, rise due to the law of diminishing marginal product. In other words, one kind of implies the other. Law of diminishing marginal product was what? Say it a little louder.
Having a unit be less useful after a certain point.
Yeah, what type of unit? I guess I want to be specific. Are you talking a unit of a hamburger or a unit of labor? Okay. So it's a unit of a resource being less productive after a while. Due to what? Somebody other than Holden, read off the definition I gave you last time. Got it?
As you add more and more of a variable resource, like goods on a grill, to at least one fixed resource, i.e. grill, the amount of product, which would be burgers, from each additional variable resource, the worker eventually falls over.
All right. It's such a thick definition that it's easier to just kind of write this, but hopefully you found that in your notes. As you add more and more of a variable resource to at least one fixed resource, the amount of output derived from that variable resource eventually falls. The productivity of the third cook, the fourth cook, the fifth cook. In other words, marginal product has nothing to do with dollars. That's the key point. There's nothing to do with dollars here. It's all about the engineering, if you will, since we got a new engineering program here. Do I have any people that are doing the engineering program, just out of curiosity? Okay, a couple people maybe. So it's kind of an engineering principle, right? I'm physically adding workers to some process, and we're getting less output. All right, that tends to drive up the cost of additional hamburgers. That principle is what causes the cost of hamburgers to go up. Now, if I go to Sam's Club and I buy a 10-pound package of hamburger, what does that cost me relative to buying it in 1-pound packages? Per pound, what happens usually? That's cheaper, right? So I want to call that to your attention too, that there's these competing costs that might be having this interrelationship with each other, perception by the general public is you get volume discounts. So most people don't get this principle, that your costs are actually going up as you produce more. Because they're thinking, oh, well, that means I can buy more hamburgers. And so indeed, per pound, each patty might be less. You might have some cost savings in terms of the per dollar price of the hamburger. But if you only got a 10% discount by buying volume burger, but you're having productivity of your workers change from an extra worker adding 60 hamburgers versus an extra worker adding 100 hamburgers, that's a big difference. That's much more costly is my point. And so no matter what's going on with that other cost, the law of diminishing marginal product is going to eventually overtake things and cause the cost of additional units to go up. All right, questions or comments there? All right, so need to talk about the short run and the long run, kind of time frames. Your chapter, those of you who read ahead, your chapter actually starts off with this topic, which is fine. I just kind of take a different angle to it. So let's look at the short run versus the long run. So we kind of talked, this is LR versus SR here. Short run versus long run. When we were talking about profits, what does a business need to earn in terms of economic profits in the long run? What's the minimum they need to have? Zippo, right? Because we covered opportunity cost. So that was one introduction to the long run. And so is it possible for businesses to earn negative profits in the short run? Do some companies absorb losses in the short run? Yeah, it happens every day. It's happening today probably somewhere. Might even be happening to a lot of companies at one time. So they're still operating, right? So we got to be thinking about this short run versus long run distinction. In other words, how long do those companies stick around? If they have sustained losses, do they last 1 month? Do they last 2 months? Do they last 3 months? Do they last 2 years? Do they last 4 years? How long can you absorb that loss? When are you done? When are you like, okay, I was kind of dumb for a while, but I'd be really dumb if I kept doing this business. I am done. I'm going out of business. I'm exiting, right? So the idea, it could be bankruptcy, but it might just be closing your doors. So bankruptcy would be if you have bills that you can't pay for, and then you use the court system to have those creditors go away. But some businesses might have paid all their bills, and they're just like, you know what, this VCR business, VCR sales have gone down, and I've tried to stay in business, but I'm just not making any money. I don't owe anybody any money, but I'm also not making any money, and my economic profit being negative tells me I can do something else, right? How long is long enough? When does a business say, you know what, I've tried my best, and it's just not working. It's not a sustainable business idea. When is it long enough? What do you think?
Depends on how long.
Depends on how long what?
Like you're measuring over, because like within a year you could have losses or whatever, but maybe over 2 years you might gain something like that.
So what does that maybe come from though? I mean, what causes us to be optimistic? I mean, what gives you some evidence that it's either time to quit or hang in there? Maybe tomorrow will look better.
How the market's reflecting, like on.
Okay, month-to-month profit wise, what about it?
So like 1 month you could be really not making anything, and the next month you could all of a sudden just have come and buy stuff or.
Okay, so what I want to think about is a situation where it's just been loss after loss after loss. So I'm going to try to take off the rose-colored glasses. I'm still an eternal optimist, but I thought it was going to happen next month. Guess what? I lost money. Oh, next month will be better. I lost money. I lost money. Maybe tomorrow, I lost money. So my point is, if we have sustained losses, when is it the right time to say, you know what, I'm done? Zach, what do you think?
Well, if you're in the VHS business, like you said, almost immediately, because you're going to see that there's technology that's replacing that. It's not like the market, whereas if it was like the food industry or something like that, where it's a restaurant,
Okay.
where people are still going to trade the burger for
So
taco.
my example was a little absurd going to VHS, but not too bad. So what's the first thing that the business owner might do when they have VHSs, knowing that there's some new technology, in order to try to survive a business? What's that? Cut prices?
Look for patterns.
What else might they do though? What do companies do that sell VHS equipment? When new technologies come out, what do they also sell? They switch to the new technology. We switch to DVDs, we switch to MP3s. So they've done that, let's say, and they're still losing money. When is it time to quit? What's that? Yeah, I guess I want to pin you down a little bit more on that. When do you really get tired? And I'll work with you on the tired part, but what causes you getting tired? What really makes it tiring? Hold on,
so stressed, like when you're, I don't know how to word it, like I don't have something like that.
What has this business person done over the last 2 years, and yet month after month after month it's a loss? There's stress, I'll give you all that. What have they done? If they're really ambitious, what have they tried? What have they done?
It's like a bad gambling habit. Like they haven't set a limit.
They've wasted time.
They put their money into it.
They put their own money into it. Have they tried everything at this point?
No. 'Cause they have
Have they tried everything at this point? Everything within their power, within their control, with the resources that they have they tried everything? Have they varied everything? Have they tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that? If this grill was a little small, did they possibly get a bigger grill or a smaller grill? Yes. Right? They've changed everything, and they're still losing money. They can't bring their long-run costs into alignment with their revenue stream. Right? Because if all we need to do is get to zero, again, assuming that opportunity costs are all covered in our total cost calculation, all opportunity costs, they can't get to zero, and they've tried everything. So when we think about that cost curve, or the cost equation, what is long-run costs? What is our long-run cost over a longer period of time? What type of costs are they? Are they all fixed? They're all variable. Because I can, and our gut feeling, you're not alone in kind of being gravitated to fixed for some reason. But in reality, over a long enough period of time, can you get out of the lease that you're in? You're paying too high a rent. It's $2,000 a month. Eventually, over some time horizon, can you get out of that fixed cost? Yes. Can you change the advertising that you're doing? Can you reduce your utility bill? Can you cut costs, change this, change this? In other words, all costs are at your fingertips to be able to adjust or vary according to the situation. And so our first concept that's important to grab onto is that in the long run, there are no fixed costs. The long run is a period of time in which all inputs, all resources are variable, and therefore all costs are variable. So, the long run is not a period of time. The long run is a period of time. It's not a year, it's not 2 years necessarily, but it is a period of time. A period of time that allows all resources to vary. Which brings us to the important principle that all costs are variable in the long run. All costs are variable in the long run. All right, so let's say you run a photography business, and you run it out of your home. Maybe you've got a studio of some sort or some space available down in your basement, and it's a nice dry basement that's suitable, nice high ceilings, so that's where your studio is. How long is the long run for you? If you're running a photography business out of your basement of your home, that's your small business. How long is the long run? Okay, equipment being paid off.
You need more room.
Till you need more room. Okay, and that's what I want to pin you down on. So talk to me about what you see in the basement. Give me some of the items. We're running a photography business. We've all had maybe some family pictures or school pictures. What do we got? Camera. What else? That little reflecty thing of the light, right? So we got that big umbrella, maybe that big silver umbrella. What else do we got? The red light. Okay, maybe some different features to change the lighting. What else do you see down there? The backdrop, right? That big roller of the back, kind of like this screen. We can pull down different backdrops, or maybe it's a curtain or whatever. We have some props. We have a computer. If it's today's day and age, there's no film, so we're just running this off of a computer. Anything else? Special flashy things that make sure you don't get the red eye or something? How long does it take us to get a new piece of any of what you just said? How long does it take you?
Till it breaks or something.
Yeah. So suppose any part of that breaks. How long does it take you to get that to your store? In today's day and age, how long does it take you? Couple days if you express ship it. A week? Would any of those items take longer than 2 weeks? Probably not. I mean, it's hard to make an argument that you couldn't shop the globe and possibly even buy something from Great Britain and have it shipped in, right? So all of your costs can be varied. So for the photography business, the long run might be 2 weeks. Okay, very short window. So what I'm trying to do here is get out of your brain that the long run is some long period of time. It's completely dependent on the situation of the business owner. So if you are John Deere making tractors and you have a 150,000 square foot facility, how long's the long run for a company like John Deere that's manufacturing tractors? Okay, how long it takes to what? Make the part they need? I don't want to think about the parts that they're doing because they're actually building the tractor. Oh, I see they might be building the inputs to make the tractor, but I want to kind of go a level deeper and think about the machine that makes those parts. Would be one thing, right? Whatever that is, that component, I'm with you. And we got some labor. We've got a big building. How long does it take for John Deere to increase any of its resources if it wants to build another plant? Are we talking 6 months? 8 what, Todd?
I mean, they're such a big company that they have so many resources and so many opportunities that they could just do this in probably like 2 days, 3 days.
So if they wanted to double their plant size, how long would it take? It's going to take longer than 2 days, that's for sure. So remember, we're in the long run. What we're trying to do is pick off the resources that would be the most difficult to replicate or double. Let's say we want to build double the size of the plant. A year? Think it'd even take longer than that, maybe? I'd almost guarantee you it'd take longer than that, believe it or not. In a case of having to find, if we started from scratch, like the board member said, you know what, business is booming, this is the right time, we're going to hit the economy's strong, we're going to hit the tractors, let's do it, double the plant size. And that was their first thought of it. Then they have to go search for land. They don't own the land right now. I didn't assume that they had the extra part of land.
You said double the plant size. Are they adding on to that plant, or are you building a
If you have to have land to build the plant, right? So imagine you have to acquire the land, go through city zoning and ordinances. Honestly, by the time you get the right building permits and stuff, it might take a year just to do that. Then you're building a 120,000 square foot facility, you're ordering in the machines, you're hiring a new labor force, you're doing all kinds of stuff. We might be 2 to 3 years down the road. So the long run for John Deere might be 2 to 3 years, whereas the long run for our photography business might be 2 to 3 weeks. So try to divorce yourself of thinking about time like, oh, 1 year is a pretty long time. That's not what the long run and the short run in economics class are all about. It's more about how long does it take us to change everything. All right, so we got maybe a similar definition here for the short run. The short run is a period of time in which at least one factor of production, one resource, one of our many words that we use for resource, at least one factor of production is fixed. There might be more than one, but what is that period of time when we only have one that we need to change? That's why I was picking on something like land or buildings, things that take a while to change up. So at a period of time in which at least one factor of production, one resource, is fixed. So for example, photography in basement, even if they need more space to double their operations, is there a for rent sign somewhere on Ottawa Main Street? Yeah, could they move in tomorrow? Yeah, might they need to fix it up to get things looking good with some new paint and carpet? Yeah, how long does that take? 2 weeks, right? So business owners can potentially move pretty fast if it's a small business. When we get into big business like John Deere, it might be more. So photography in basement might be 2 to 3 weeks is the long run. Now bear in mind, long run, short run, that's the turning point, right? So the end of the short run is the start of the long run. So 2 to 3 weeks might be this long run, short run trade-off. The short run, long run breaking point. John Deere might be 2 to 3 years. The key point is it depends. It depends on the business. Depends on the nature of the business and what's all going on there. Okay, so how does this translate into cost? So let's kind of stay with our business theme here and put the quantity and dollars up here, and then go ahead and draw an average total cost curve like we did last time. Average total cost, ATC. We take the total cost of our operations and we have that bowl-shaped look. We won't draw the variable cost on this time, just look at the average. average cost is minimized here. You can go ahead and draw a big fat dot. That turned out to be the spot where the marginal cost curve cut through it. In other words, there's some level of production that is at this minimum point, wherever that is. Let's say it's 200 units of production. Well, let's say that this is operating out of our small facility. I'll just use the word small. We could put a number on there. Let's say we have 10,000 square feet or something, right? So we have some building that we're manufacturing what good are we manufacturing here? Give me a good, any good Twinkies? All right, we'll do Twinkies. So we got the quantity of Twinkies here. In the small building, we found that we can do 200. That's the quantity that minimizes cost. Now, let's say we were operating at 200. As the Twinkie business starts to grow, what happens to my average cost per Twinkie? So what's a box of Twinkies is running, what do you think here, $3? $4? $3.50? Let's go 3 just to keep a nice even number. I'll work with you on the $3.50 later. So Twinkie business is booming. If Twinkie business is booming, what is the company needing to do for production? Growth. Growth in production, right? Now, if next week's orders, this is orders per day, let's say, if next week we get an order for 300 Twinkies, do we go and lease out more space? If this is a week-by-week basis? No, we pay some overtime and we run our facility a little bit longer. We crank out the 300 Twinkies. Those 300 Twinkies are going to cost me the $3.50 that you were just talking about. Next week, production falls back to 200, no big deal. Next week, 300. Next week, 300. Another week, 300. 300. 300. The economy's going good. There's positive signs. Business is good. People are loving Twinkies. It's all over social media. They love the cream filling. They love the new colors, the black, the brown. 300, 300, 300, 300, 300. What do you think they might want to do? Expand. So if business can sustain it, there's probably a bigger facility that would be more efficient for the production of 300 Twinkies. So let's build it. If we build that facility, let's just say it looks like this. I didn't have to, you don't have to draw it through there. My eye just kind of drew me to it. So, but I do want you to kind of have it overlapping somewhere, where this is the average total cost in a medium-sized building. By biting the bullet and getting the bigger facility, they're able to crank out Twinkies at an average cost per Twinkie of $2.50. Now, if business falls down because there's a recession down to 150 Twinkies, was it a good move to go into the new facility? No, because in this big facility, there's a lot of extra space, unutilized capacity. It's actually driving the average cost of a Twinkie, because I'm trapped in the medium-sized building, up to $3.50, right? So if production is going to be 200 or less, we're better off being in the small building, not the big building, because we have this excess room. All right, so we go down that path again. We'll do kind of one more here. Suppose that the Twinkie business is booming and we get out to orders coming in at 400. And at 400, we have a cost curve that looks like this. For the large building. as long as production levels stay out here, that seems to be the optimal level of plant size, of building size. In the long run, I can be in a big building, I can be in a small building. If I need to reduce down and my plant size is too big, I'm going to go find myself a smaller building, right? So in the long run, I can vary any of my inputs. All right. So what does the long run cost curve look like? The long run average cost curve. What does it look like? Do you see it up there? Connect the dots. It's even a little different than connecting the dots, but you're on the right track, kind of. It's not.
Put all three of them.
Okay, so how are you doing it?
So you start at the very edge of.
Come on up! Come on up! I like your excitement. Let's see it. There's the orange marker. I'm sorry, give me your name again. Robert. Ooh, okay. Looking pretty good. Thank you. All right, so now you kind of drew a nice continuous line, which is kind of what we'd probably expect to see in reality. Another way to think about it would be if I could only choose small, medium, large, which we know isn't right, we could think of it being this line, the outer envelope of it, right? But in reality, I totally agree with you, and I'm not trying to discount, I just kind of wanted to show that if this is 10,000 square feet and this is 20,000 square feet, then there's another one that's 15,000, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. And so pretty soon we're getting Robert's nice smooth curve, because in the long run, I can be in any size building I want. I can change my production to being whatever we think is efficient for production. And so the orange curve here is the long run average total cost curve. We usually just, I don't think they put the extra T on there, but just maybe to be clear here, we can do it. We'll put it in parentheses. A lot of times, just because it's getting too many letters, we'll just go long run average cost. Sometimes LPC. I honestly can't remember. I try to be consistent with the book. Now, what do you think about Robert's turn this way? Does that sound logical? That cost would actually go up the bigger you get, possibly? Or would it be more realistic that maybe it would come down and get basically flat, but could it actually turn up? Why do you think it would turn up? Let me go, Tyler.
I don't know, because if you're making more more productive, like if you're making more for less
Okay.
cost,
Trying to think what cost would be going up if we got bigger. What's that? Well, in the long run, we don't have fixed costs. So we're allowing that to change. So trying to imagine what would cause a company to have costs actually. In other words, it would have been almost better in terms of cost. By the way, are we in the business of being a cost minimizer? Is that the objective of the firm, is to minimize cost? No. It's tempting to say yes, isn't it, when I say it that way? But remember, I'm tricking you, because every time you hear what the objective of the firm is, what is it? Make profit, which has two parts of the equation: total revenue and total cost. One way to minimize cost is to go out of business. That's one way to reduce all your costs. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to make profit as big as possible. And so just because we've had costs go up a little wouldn't necessarily mean that's bad that we should be smaller, because we might be still making more profit at this production level than we were here. So don't let that scare you. But I do want to think a little bit about what could possibly cause the cost to be going up, because that's a little weird. Okay, increase in minimum wage, not necessarily we'd be holding that constant, but you're onto something with labor. What do you think goes on in big organizations?
You're going to have more costs, you're going to have more labor, more maintenance, more facilities.
Yeah.
It's going to be more.
We'd like to think if I doubled the plant size, if I have a plant in Ottawa and I want to make one in Olathe, that I can replicate everything, right? What would cause there to be an increase possibly in cost when we start to get really big? And now we've got one in Topeka, one in Ottawa, one in Olathe, one in Lee's Summit, right? And I'm running out of cities in Kansas here. One in Wichita. You're running this whole organization. What type of labor concerns might you have when you get bigger and bigger that might cause efficiency to go down and therefore your costs, on average, to maybe turn up a little? Robert's turn might be a little strong here, but I'm with you that actually data shows that the cost could turn up on you a little bit. What becomes difficult when you've got all of these multiple sites?
Liability.
Management. Not so much the liability. Liability we can probably manage through insurance and stuff, but the management of it. Because when you started off in your garage, and you started off in Ottawa, the owner, who's now the CEO, went to the shop, saw the people working, everything was fine, but now has to rely on Vice President Tom to run the Olathe branch, and Vice President Vicky to run the Wichita branch. And now Vicky and Tom and the owner have to have meetings every once in a while and figure out what the other one's doing, right? It's pretty, once you start to think about the complexity of growing an organization in terms of management, that's where we might start to see an uptick in some cost eventually when we get so big. But it might be a little more less than that turn up. All right, any other questions or comments there? So this section where we get kind of the, almost like a volume discount, but it's not quite that, but as I increase the scale of production, as I get bigger and bigger, and if I'm able to enjoy a decrease in average cost per unit, economists call that economies of scale. Economies of scale. So our definition for economies of scale is tied directly to the long run cost. So economies of scale is as you increase quantity, that's where the word scale comes in, the scale of production. As you increase quantity, long run average costs decrease. That makes it kind of attractive. If I can lower my average cost per unit, in theory, I should be able to make more money. It should be more profitable if I'm lowering my average cost. If we run into the Robert situation where we've got this thing turning up, and so now I've got two here. I don't know how you guys drew it. You might not have drawn this curve here. If you get to this point where it's turning up, we just call it diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale. So I won't write that definition out because it's just the opposite of this. We got economies of scale is probably the more normal thing that we think about. We get bigger and cost per unit falls. let's write the management comment there for diseconomies. So note, diseconomies might come from a management constraint. More costly to have multiple managers as we grow. All right. Questions or comments there? So we've kind of had, let me just do a little bit of a recap or a review for this stuff that I think things you should have memorized for this chapter. So this is chapter 11 again. Chapter 11, memorization suggestion. Graphically, be able to do our average cost graph. You guys have it in your notes already, but it's the average total cost, the average variable cost, bottoms out, and then just start making it come narrower. Put a big fat dot, a big fat dot, a little J-shaped marginal cost curve. Our equation goggles had this formula of breaking total cost into two parts, those that vary, those that are fixed. The average total cost was given by dividing by quantity, dividing total cost by quantity, and gave us this relationship. Your textbook has a nice little summary of all of this stuff in like some of their tables too. So this kind of captures all the averages and totals. And then the formula for marginal cost, probably the most important, was this. The changes in total cost, which we learned are also related to the only thing that changes is the variable cost. So if you get this, we've spent quite a bit of time. If you get this and you can replicate this, you're doing pretty good. Okay? That covers a lot of ground. All right, questions? So we're going to talk about the other part of the equation and the interaction of the two. That chapter focused all on cost. So now we're going to look at revenues. and the whole picture. And before we get there, I want to put into context the decision making that goes on for the firm is somewhat determined by the external environment that they operate in. So the choices that they make are determined in some degree by, for instance, the number of competitors they have, right? We kind of all know that. What they price their hamburgers at might depend on whether there's a Burger King right across the street. And so we're going to look at the spectrum of competition. So I like to look at two ends of the spectrum. At one end, what would perfect competition look like?
Fruits and vegetables.
Fruits and vegetables. Well, hold on. I just want to kind of think about what exactly that means. What about fruits and vegetables that do it? So I'm not looking for an answer yet. So one end of the spectrum, you know, we'd have this environment of perfect competition. In reality, we probably don't find absolutely perfect competition. So this is kind of a theoretical bookend that helps give us some insight into reality. At the other end of the bookend is no competition. What do we call that? Monopoly. So if there's only one firm, by definition, we call it a monopoly. One firm. And what's the goal of the board game? Those of you who've played the board game, probably most of us, maybe once upon a time. How do you win Monopoly game?
Financially and everybody else.
Yep, kind of get everybody else out so that you're the last person standing, right? All right. That board game, by the way, is not quite right. I think it gives a bad perception of capitalism and the marketplace, because although firms may indeed want to attempt to control the market, what Monopoly doesn't observe that the market does actually do in reality is it adds dollars to that bank. It actually creates wealth, right? So at the beginning of the board game, what do? What are we starting with? Separate money, right? So you get what? One of those $1,000, two of the 500s, 5 of the 20s, right? We dish out the dough. Some of you are looking at me like, what? I never had paper money, because you played Monopoly with the little credit card version or whatever. But the good old-fashioned kind, you had actual paper money that you played with, and there was hundreds, 50s, and there was a 500, right? So anyway, you dish out the money, and that's your starting point. That part of the game I don't mind, because every business starts off with a certain amount of resources. But what's wrong about Monopoly is that what real businesses do is they take that money and they create wealth with it so that they actually have more, and more importantly, it's not at the expense of the other player who's playing. In Monopoly, what happens is we take their money, they pay us, and it's a zero-sum game. In the real world of competition and capitalism, both players can see their bank accounts rise. So even though you're both playing possibly even against each other, you can both grow wealth together. And there can remain multiple competitors that are doing very well with each other. Because back to Tom and Jen on the island, if we specialize in what we're good at, we can create wealth through trade. When there's more there, it's not a fixed pie, we can make a bigger pie. So don't put too much into the Monopoly game. There's some parallels there, especially since that's the goal here, is to have one firm. But the real world's a little bit different than that. All right, so one firm over here, there's no competition. Perfect competition has lots of buyers, or lots of sellers, many sellers. We might even think of thousands of sellers. So many sellers. What's that? Restaurant business, perhaps, depending on our market, of course. I mean, If we look at restaurants in Kansas, yeah, there's lots of them. If we look at restaurants in Wellsville or a smaller community, there might be just one or two, right? So I'm thinking of an environment where there's many, so we'd have to have the market defined as pretty big. But yeah, many might be that. The other thing to make it perfect is that everybody sells the exact same product. So we have what we call a homogeneous product. Homogeneous product. Identical products. So we're going to have a whole bunch of people selling the exact same thing. Now, we might start to think of some parallels already of businesses that are selling the exact same thing. Why don't you mention a few? What comes to mind? The iPhone 6. That would be one, right? I mean, the resellers of those, you go to the mall and there's the little kiosk, you got them at Costco, you go to Walmart. So we've got multiple sellers, potentially many sellers, selling the same product. So that kind of checks off 2 marks there for that market characterized that way as being many sellers selling a homogeneous product, right? Okay. So we've got a bunch of people selling a homogeneous product, and in order for this to be a perfectly competitive market, new people can come in too, real easily. So there's free entry and exit. Companies can enter the market, but they can also leave pretty fast, like a kiosk at the mall. If they're on a month-to-month, some of those kiosks, by the way, are on a week-to-week basis. So at the end of the week, they paid the rent, they're out of there, they're done. iPhones aren't selling, I'm out, I'm going to exit, right? So it's real easy to enter the market, and it's real easy to exit the market. Well, that sets up our characteristics of a perfectly competitive market. And we'll spend some time looking at what that is. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got, well, hello, sir. Are you just popping in for fun?
Keep motoring on.
All right. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got the one firm, so we've already kind of offset that, so one seller. If there's one seller, what type of product are they selling? There's only one thing, right? So it's, again, kind of a homogeneous product here. Homogeneous product. By definition, since there's only one seller, and for now, we're going to talk about them just selling one product. There are such things as multi-product monopolists, so they might have a couple variations of products. But for this extreme, let's say we've got one seller selling one product, and then what do you think about this criteria when we have a monopoly? It's hard to get in, right? It's like, why do they have it? I don't know. There's barriers to entry. Barriers to entry. Something's keeping them from getting in. Connor?
Are there any monopolies right now at this time?
So yeah, and we can have monopolies in a variety of ways. So yes, there is. If you want to have electric service at your house, guess who you got to go to here in Ottawa?
Oh, so it'll be a monopoly like
One particular thing, yeah. So in electricity, Ottawa has a monopoly in electric service coming over those lines. We can start to get into, well, what if I had a solar panel on my house, right? So is that the same type of product or not? Well, you got to have the right infrastructure. You know, we can start to have those discussions. But for the most part, the city of Ottawa has a monopoly on the provision of electricity. So that would be one possibility. So where do these, what else do you think, think of some other companies that have a lot of market power, and we'll talk whether they're a formal monopoly or not. What do you think? Walmart, yeah, that's a big company. Now, are they the only seller? No. Okay, so they're not a monopoly, but they have some power. They have some market power, right? So I'm with you there. Apple. Now, so with Apple, how many competitors does Apple have? Do they have any competitors? Yes, so they have some market power, but they're not maybe a perfect monopoly. Okay, good. What else? The gas company, the electric company, where do they get their market power from? What's the barrier? I think I heard somebody say it begins with a G.
Government.
The government, right. So the government can sometimes get involved and grant a monopoly. So we'll talk about that too. Now, the government does grant a monopoly in a lot of different areas. Think of some. Maybe even actually in terms of the Apple or some of these companies. How does the government grant exclusive rights to a company? Through a patent, right? So they have a patent on that, and there's copyrights that not any old company can write Diet Dew and use this color scheme, Diet Mountain Dew at the MTN. They have a trademark, right? So through the law, they're able to exclusively market a soda with that writing on it. Now, can other companies copy the formula so that it basically tastes the same? Yeah, all of them, all the knockoffs. So it's possible to copy them after the patent wears out. When does that happen? Anybody know? How long do you get a patent run? 40? I just didn't hear what you said. 4 to 6. It's longer than that. Sometimes companies only have that type of run for other ones. It's about 17 years. So the government grants you the ability, if you come up with, hey, I got this invention with, this would probably be one of them, I bet that's under a patent right now, because I haven't ever seen these in all the years I've been teaching. I've been using them since I came here, but these refillable markers designed kind of like this, where I can take out this cartridge, and they probably have a design patent on this. Now that patent is granted to them not for forever, but only 17 years. Only 17 years this company can have exclusive rights. In other words, if a knockoff company makes a marker just like this company, who is Chisel, no, that's not it. Boardmaster, Boardmaster, it's made by Pilot. Here we go, Pilot. They can sue that company for knocking off their product. And then it'll go to a judge, and they'll say, well, wait a second, our marker's not exactly like that. It's the color red on the cartridge instead of the color blue, so it's totally different, even though everything else is identical. The judge would make a decision there if it's substantially different or if they really copied them and violated the patent law. Okay? Did I hear another comment or question before I started going?
Can you explain the patent on medication? Or how that
So yeah, patent on medication is same way. So they'll get a 17-year run, and that's actually one that that has a lot of different stories. I'll tell you one of them. Have you guys heard of this thing called Viagra? Maybe you've heard about it. I'm not really sure of all the details of it myself, of course, but guess what that was when they got the patent on the drug? The patent was a heart medication. That's right. So when they developed the medication, they're like, wow, this is the greatest thing for heart disease. Here, take this. Okay, I'll take it. Boing. They're like, whoa, that's pretty interesting. So they started down the patent process, and then the heart medication evolved. They probably did a little trial and error with tweaking things, and eventually turned into Viagra. And then I think it's maybe in a different dose or a different amount of milligrams of the product, but it evolved into Viagra. But unfortunately for them, they were already 7+ years or so into their patent. So it was patented. They got a 17-year run. By the time drugs going through the FDA and all the bureaucratic process that they actually hit the market, and they found these unfortunate secondary side effects, right, that turned out to have a pretty big market in themselves and turned into Viagra, they only had like 10 years left. So the Viagra patent, I think, just ran out the last year or two. And so now companies can fully within their rights go in and exactly copy that drug. And you you can backwards induce how the chemists can take apart. They just go out to the store, buy a Viagra, cut it up, put it under their microscope, and they can figure out the exact chemical compound of what you need to do to recreate it. And so that happens with drugs of all kinds, pesticides. You guys have heard of Roundup, right? Roundup, that patent, I'm not sure where they're at on their patent life, and then they sometimes evolve it over time, but there was a guy that was a multi-millionaire that I guess had a little bit of a questionable way that he made his millions, because he took Roundup, he was a chemist, backward engineered it, and started selling it in Brazil. Because in Brazil, they don't enforce the United States patent laws. So he was able to figure out the Roundup and started selling it in Brazil and made a bunch of money that way. He's up in Ankeny, Iowa. He's got this mansion that you can see right from the freeway. I think his net worth was in the 100 million range, one of the richest guys in Iowa. So that is that fair to the Roundup guy, the original inventor? Life's not fair, you gotta take them as they come. You know, is it good for the consumer? You know, what is the impact? You know, I guess the question I'm asking is, why does the government grant a monopoly when we all know that monopolies jack up their prices, right, and make a bunch of money? Why do they do that?
Doesn't it inspire entrepreneurship?
Okay, good.
Why
So
would I invent something if I know that somebody's just going to steal it?
right, and so the flip side would be that it would be a big deterrent to inventions if I knew that anybody could copy me, right? Why would I want to spend the time coming up with the latest, greatest technology, and that takes time and resources if I'm not going to have an opportunity to recoup that, at least for a period of time. And so the government, over the years, has decided that, you know what? You better make all your money you can in 17 years. We don't want to discourage entrepreneurship and innovation and new technology. We know how important that is to the economy. We know how important that is to the consumers. But you get a 17-year run. And then they need to capture all the profits that they need over that 17 years, and then all the copycats can come out after that. Okay? All right, yeah.
Where did they get the 17-year from?
You know, I don't know where they got that from. It is pretty random. I think it would totally depend on the market and what the product is. If that's a reasonable amount of time to recoup the money, you know, with my argument before copycats come out. So that would be an interesting thing to research. I'm putting it on you to Google that afterwards. No, I don't want to discourage you asking questions. You don't have to do that. But I don't know where it came from, other than I know from a financial standpoint, 17 years is a long period of time. And so I would think they're probably trying to cover just about any invention. Like, you should be able to recoup. If we grant you a monopoly and you've got the latest, greatest thing, you should be able to recoup whatever those costs were over a 17-year period. And so I would think it would represent close to the maximum amount of time for anything that doesn't exist today, because that's kind of the weird thing about it, right? We don't know the circumstances, but from a financial standpoint, you should be able to recoup whatever that is in 17 years. That'd be my guess. All right. Any other comments or questions?
You can renew your patent, right? You can buy it. You can't.
No. You can, what companies do is they modify it and come out with a new thing, and so they tweak it and they try to change it, and then they can get a patent for the new thing and get another run. But the old thing can still be copied. And again, they have to make a substantial modification to whatever it was. And don't ask me what substantial means in the world of, you know, biomedical medicine. I don't know if that's a tweak of something, or just, it's certainly not new packaging. I know that. There would have to be a substantial change. But what companies have found also is that once you've burned it into the brains of people that I go to Roundup for weed control, I go to Viagra for erections, I go to Kleenex for blowing my nose, right? Even after the patent runs out and a perfectly good substitute comes to the market, people still tend to buy the old one. And then if you have that power, you can probably make your price more competitive so that the generic knockoff, they can't compete. Yeah, they'll take the name brand one as long as, even if it's a little bit more, if it's 20% more expensive, people say, oh, I just want to be sure that I got the highest quality product possible or whatever. Yeah, especially in medicine. I mean, from a chemistry standpoint, it is the exact same thing. Generic drugs are exactly the same because all of that's still controlled by the Food and Drug Administration. So even if you don't trust the private company, the government's done a little bit of checking on that too. Did I see another hand up back there?
Like a good choice at the off-brand stuff at like Walmart.
Say that again?
What about like the good choice at the off-brand stuff at Walmart?
Yeah, that can be the same thing. Now, part of the generic offerings is to give a good substitute for it. And so the cereal could be absolutely copied. And so it's as good of a cornflake as possible. Now maybe the environment in which they make it or whatever, but all of those are ways that the grocery stores can kind of market their own brand at a cheaper price. Yeah. A lot of generic brands are made by the same company, by the way. It's not illegal for them to do that. So they put the exact same product. They might change the size or they might change something, but the exact same thing. It's like we fill it up. This goes in the name brand bottle, and then we'll have the black and white bottle coming through here, of the generic brand. So that happens also. And for good reasons that will come into when we talk about price discrimination in this chapter, which is kind of a fun topic. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we've got two more in the middle that are probably closer to reality. I think I'll start here since we've been talking about monopoly. We have an oligopoly. Probably a word you've never heard of before, very specific to economics. Oligopoly. Might be oligopoly, I'll live with that, I don't know.
No.
You say tomato, I say tomato.
Government is an oligarchy.
Oh, oligarchy, yeah, that's right, that's different. So oligopoly, what we're going to do is we're going to tweak this stuff over here. And an oligopoly is an industry that has a few sellers. So not one seller, not many sellers, but a few sellers. And so the correct question would be, well, what do you mean by a few? You know, is that 10? Is that 5? Is that 2? Well, the answer to that is that it's few enough so that each firm is interdependent with the other. When one firm makes a decision, it has an impact on my bottom line, right? So firms tend to act strategically with each other. One firm's decision impacts my company. If iPhone cuts their prices in half and I have an Android HTC, it hurts me, right? I didn't do anything. I just have my phone out there. But if iPhone did something, I get impacted by it. So interdependent firms, that's what we mean by few. Few sellers that are interdependent. Interdependent. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get to it. These few sellers have a homogeneous good or heterogeneous good. Heterogeneous means differentiated. I usually do this one first, but you guys took me in this direction today. So, in other words, the goods can be slightly different from each other. McDonald's hamburger versus Burger King hamburger, the iPhone versus the HTC. They both, you can pick them up, you can dial, you can call people, you can surf the internet. You know, the smartphones are all pretty good substitutes with each other, but so they're not identical. They're not homogeneous. They are heterogeneous, slightly different from each other. And then finally in this market, we've got barriers to entry. Same thing we had for monopoly. These barriers might come from high cost of getting into the business, right? So, and by the way, this could have been over here too, but it might have been very costly to start up a business. So suppose you want to be in the airplane business. Oh, I can make airplanes as good as Boeing, right? Do you just overnight start up an airplane business, or might it take you a few $100 billion to actually get started, right? So there's a high cost of entering. That creates a barrier to entry. So high cost is another thing that could cause a barrier to entry. All right, so oligopolies, as we've kind of alluded to, possibly the Walmarts, the iPhones, the phone carriers. We've got Verizon and Sprint and T-Mobile and those companies, car productions, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, and then we can add in BMW and Mercedes, and so all of those have this type of feel to them on this side of the market. On the spectrum of competition, I placed them not in the middle, but a little bit closer to the monopoly side because of the power that they have. They have a little more discretion, a little more market power. All right, any other questions there on oligopoly? Our last one here that we'll be referring to, which I'll put on the spectrum even a little closer to perfect competition, but the name is kind of weird. It's monopolistic, like a monopoly, monopolistic competition. The reason I drew it on the spectrum closer to here is that it really is closer to competition, perfect competition, than it is to monopoly. And I'm just going to erase a little bit of what I have here to squeeze it in, since I don't have room to draw this down and I don't want to go over there. So with monopolistic competition, we have many sellers. So there's lots of sellers. That's not a problem. And we have a differentiated or heterogeneous product. Heterogeneous, or more frequently called a differentiated product. I don't mean to be putting this as another bullet, it's all under one. Differentiated. Not a different product. So we're not talking about soda and hamburgers. We're talking about hamburgers from Burger King versus hamburgers from Wendy's versus hamburgers from McDonald's. They're differentiated from each other, right? They're all hamburgers, so they can be, in the eyes of many people, pretty good substitutes. If you're out for a burger and you want a fast food burger, you go to one of those places,
Do they,
right?
do they like patent hamburgers? Like, can Burger King make a Big Mac or something?
They can have some of their recipes. Well, they keep them secret because, again, ultimately, can we prove that they're not there? So no, they can't patent the recipe. But they keep them. The old Colonel Sanders was their famous line was the secret recipe for their fried chicken. So they can patent the packaging of it and that sort of stuff and the branding through trademarks. All right, and then the last thing here is also free entry and exit. Free entry and exit. So what did we really do to perfect competition to make it monopolistic competition? We just made that differentiated product. Instead of having identical products, we allowed them to be differentiated. And that's why this is a little closer to reality. So a lot of our companies all the goods on the shelves at Walmart, all of that stuff generally fall in this monopolistic competition environment. All right, so we are going to devote a full chapter to each one of these market structures. Chapter 12 is perfect competition. Then we're going to run to the other end of the spectrum, and chapter 13 is on monopoly. Then we'll come back here to monopolistic competition, which is fairly short chapter 14, and chapter 15 is on oligopoly. All right. So let's see. I guess you guys are more over here. If a company is operating in a perfectly competitive environment, do they have much control on the price of their product, do you think? Again, this is kind of a somewhat abstract, but we talked about a few of them, like if you're one of these iPhone sellers and one of your, something else. Todd, what did you mention? You originally, when we did perfect competition, you brought up vegetables or something else, fruits and vegetables. So if we talk about a farmer, and we think about bananas, we think about anything, wheat, corn, any sort of agricultural products. Are those falling in line here? We got many farmers selling basically an identical product. Free entry and exit, depending on how we characterize it, if we can start selling. So that agricultural products play pretty well. How much power does an individual company operating in this environment have on their price? Do they have a lot of control over their price? No, not much, right? Because it's like, if they raise their price by a penny, and this is especially true on the internet, right? When you guys go shopping for something and you want to buy a golf club or a set of clubs or something from an internet, maybe golf clubs has too high a shipping, but if you want to buy this mouse, my son's got one of the gaming mouses with all the extra bells and whistles, right? You go to Google, you hit in, I want a Microsoft model number 643877, and what do you get? 100 online sellers that are willing to sell you this thing. Some have shipping, we start to shop. So can any one of those online sellers afford to raise their product price very much? No, because it's going to we have apps and other things that are going to search for the lowest price one, and they're going to rank the lowest price first. We go to the top of the list, homogeneous product, I don't care who I'm buying it from, as long as they've got a good star rating and they seem reputable, I'm going to buy it from them, right? So we've got that type of thing going on, and those are all various elements of a perfectly competitive market. So I want to draw two graphs side by side with each other. The graph to the left is home base. Home base for our corn or our gaming mouse, maybe. I don't know if I want to stick with the gaming mouse concept here or not. I'll think about it. So currently, we're at this price. Maybe corn is going for $5 a bushel. I wouldn't mind doing your fruit thing. What kind of fruit did you have in mind, Todd? Or somebody mentioned bananas, I guess. That'd be fine too. True, yeah, bananas do get a little tricky, and there's some history, although I think it's much more competitive now, but there's still quite a bit of control. So what fruit did you have? Pineapples, okay. So let's try pineapples. So we got the pineapples running $5. That's probably a little expensive. Maybe we'll make that $3. So let's $3. We'll try to keep it nice and easy. All right, so we've got some amount being traded in the market. Maybe it's 100 units. And maybe it's 100,000 units if we're talking about the market. Maybe this is in thousands, just to kind of get the idea that it's a big pineapple marketplace. Over to the right, I've got the average farmer here, kind of just the representative farmer, Farmer Joe. So this is Farmer Joe over here, the pineapple farmer. Farmer Joe is just one of these farmers in the pineapple business. I'm going to get a little Q here to make a distinction between the pineapples that Joe is bringing to the market versus the big Q of the total market quantity. So let's give Joe a little Q. And if you're Joe and you've got these circumstances and the market is telling you that the pineapples are selling for $3, and you've got pineapples that are basically the same as anybody else's pineapples, what do you think the demand is for your pineapples if you were to produce 10 of them? What do you think is the price you'll get for your 10? $1? So the big market for pineapples is $3. What do you think you might get? $3? Does that sound reasonable, right? If the going rate is for pineapples is $3 and Joe produces $3, what's the demand for his particular pineapples? Oh, it's probably $3. Now, what if Joe got ambitious one day and he doubled production to 20? What do you think he's going to get? Well, I'm kind of, this is in thousands, and this is my little guy, Farmer Joe here. How much is he going to get now if he brings 20 pineapples to the market? How much is he going to get per pineapple? $3. And so, no matter how much little Joe brings to the market, the demand for his pineapples is effectively perfectly, oh, I hear some N's and some E's, elastic, right? Because as it starts to get steeper, it starts to look like an I, so that's the inelastic. So lo and behold, here we have a story where it's that extreme economics, that crazy stuff that economists get going here, one of the extreme cases where the demand curve is indeed perfectly elastic, perfectly elastic. All right, so the idea is that each individual producer is so small that their production doesn't make a difference to the market. The way I like to think about it is, imagine that this bucket is filled with water up to here. Okay? Up to here is the bucket. If I take an eyedropper and I go boop, boop, and I put 2 drops of water, do you see the bucket level rise? No, right? You'd have to have a pretty good microscope on it to see that. That's how small Joe is relative to the market. Farmer Joe is so small relative to the market that he's essentially insignificant all by himself. He's a drop of water in the bucket. And so we say that he is a price taker. So Farmer Joe is a price taker. He takes the price that's given to him by the market. Now, if Joe does indeed sell 10 in the market, what is his total revenue? What's his total revenue for his company if he brings 10 to the market? $30. $30, good. So we can kind of bring this back into the bigger discussion of profits. Profits are equal to total revenue minus total cost. We spent a whole chapter talking about total cost. Now we're going to start to hone in on revenues. So total revenue is equal to price times quantity minus our total cost. And in this case, at a production level of 10, so at Q, little q, equal to 10, we have total revenue equal to 3 times 10 equals 30. If Joe ramps up production to 20, total revenue is what? 60, 20 times 3. So what if Joe ramps up production to 21? What is his marginal revenue of the 21st unit? How much? The marginal revenue. $3. Good. So the revenue generated by the 21st unit is the price I get for it. Since I can get I can produce as many as I want, and I'm going to get the market price, we now have uncovered another little feature of this, and that is that for Farmer Joe, the demand curve is the marginal revenue curve. The demand curve is the marginal revenue curve. Using these numbers here, what is the marginal revenue? What was marginal cost? I gave that to you earlier. The formula for it? Marginal cost. Change in what? Total costs divided by that change in quantity. So yeah, make sure you got those up. So it was the change in total cost over the change in quantity. Guess what the marginal revenue formula is? Change in total revenue over the change in quantity. What is it using these numbers? Change in total revenue is 30. Change in quantity is 10. 30 divided by 10 equals, you got it, $3. So no matter how we slice it up, the marginal revenue of each additional unit is fixed at the market price. All right, so that's important. Now, we've talked about Farmer Joe and any business. What is their objective? Maximize profit. So what if Farmer Joe faces a marginal cost curve? We were just drawing some of those J-shaped ones. Let's draw one like this. You can have this thing bottom out, I guess, if you want, right where the 10 was. That'd work out too. It doesn't really matter, but so if you already drew it, don't worry about it. Where does Farmer Joe maximize profits? What production level? 10, 20, I heard? You didn't say 20? You didn't mean to. It slipped out. All right. Well, let's see, Alyssa. Let's see what you're thinking here. If this 10 looks pretty good, right? We're making a lot of money. Difference between revenue and cost. Total revenue minus total cost. We're trying to maximize it. So visually, we're trying to maximize that. So, Alyssa, I'm gonna pick on you a little bit, but don't worry, I won't be too harsh on you. Let's just say that the cost of the 10th unit, was, I guess, $1. Let's see if you're stupid for producing the 11th. Tell me about the 11th one in terms of profits. So here you were making 10. I want to isolate the decision, should I do the 11th pineapple or should I not do it? What is the revenue generated by the 11th pineapple? You're going to get $3. So let's take it one baby step at a time. You're absolutely right. You're going to get $3 for the 11th pineapple. What happens to your cost of the 11th? If this was at the very bottom part here, what does the cost of the 11th do? It goes up. So we shouldn't do it? Should we make that 11th, or was it indeed stupid to do it? You still make a profit on it, right? So, if the 11th, again, just making up a number, if the 11th cost me $1.15, and I was able to sell it for $3, was that a good idea? Yeah. Am I stupid to do the 12th? Am I stupid to do the 13th? In fact, when should I stop?
After 20.
Before 20 at the 19th?
Yes.
So it's always tricky when we get to the 19th. So here we go. We got the 19th. The price is greater than the cost of the 19th. Should I do the 20th or not?
Well, the 20 is breaking even.
20th is breaking even. So the cost of it was $3, and the revenue generated by it was $3. Should I do it or should I not? Not. Wrong. Those of you who said not. So those of you who were inkling towards maybe I should, you might be right. Why? It's totally okay in economics class to earn zero money. What? I gotta have profits. Well, we've accounted for that, haven't we? Because in the costs are all implicit costs as well as explicit costs. And so you're earning a normal profit, if that's built into the calculation. It's better to actually still produce that unit. And so you are right. The profit maximizing quantity is 20. We've just unveiled the holy grail of business. How does a firm maximize profits? By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of the last unit. Where this thing intersects this thing, we'll pick up there on Monday. Todd?
Yeah, I like how you explained that.
Yes, and actually I'll give it to you before. So do you want me to do what I just said?
Yeah.
To maximize profits? Produce the quantity. Produce the quantity where the revenue generated